As a warning, this podcast covers the death of a loved one and could be upsetting for some listeners. The episode also contains discussion of sexual assault, so please take care when listening. Kia ora, welcome to this episode in Season 5 of Recovering. I'm Frank Ritchie, minister, chaplain and radio broadcaster. Recovering is a Media Chaplaincy New Zealand podcast highlighting the excellent work of Aotearoa New Zealand journalists. Media Chaplaincy is a team of chaplains around the country offering free, independent and confidential support for media professionals. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with a leading journalist to discuss the story that's had the biggest impact on them both personally and professionally. In this episode, I sat down with Melissa Chan Green. Mel is an award-winning broadcast journalist, best known for her work on TV3, including co-hosting the AM show and time as foreign correspondent for 3 News.
Paul, we're just getting reports of some shots in the area, so we will come back to you. We've all been told to shut down and move on.
She's covered everything from the Arab Spring uprisings to the Paris terror attacks and the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. In this episode, we cover a story of loss, 5 years in the making.
Was there any sign during the ceremony that she was feeling unwell?
As she was walking down the aisle and she got closer to where we were, I just knew something wasn't quite right.
The story highlights Mel's human-first approach to storytelling, her wisdom around grief and her level-headedness. Mel, thanks for coming into our humble little studio. You are the last guest for this podcast that's going to be in this little studio. This little studio that I've mentioned before has had various reactions from laughter to, it's so cute and cozy.
I feel honoured, knowing the conversations you've had in here. I feel honoured to be able to come in and share this time with you as well before you leave.
I remember when I started at News Talk ZB. I do Sunday nights on News Talk ZB, just a little show with my co-host Jax. And I remember the very first show that I did for ZB, I sat in the same seat that Paul Holmes sat in, and it felt like such a great honour. So you just sparked that memory.
Yeah, of place being especially within newsrooms, because, you know, it's witness to historic moments through the way we tell those stories. And so, yeah, leaving Flower Street actually at TV3 was quite an emotional experience, just because those walls, the walls of this old kind of cheese factory or something, I think it was, have played witness to a number of big events as well.
Yeah, and a team that had battled as seemingly the little guy for many, many years and turned into quite a tight-knit group of people. And of course, you were part of TV3 for quite some time. Yeah, for... testing my maths here, but it was close to 17, 18 years, I think. It was a huge part of my life, and probably, significant part of my life as well. Walking away from that was sad, but also I think the 6 months that we'd had to process that made it a lot easier as well. Yeah, good. And of course, before you started at TV3, there was a little while at TVNZ. But how did you get started in journalism?
Well, I was 16 actually, and Kay Gregory, who was a weather reporter at TV1 at the time, came and did a talk at our school for our journalism class. And I think I put my hand up a lot. A friend of mine and myself put our hands up and asked a lot of questions, and afterwards Kay mentioned to the teacher, I think those students are quite interested, I'm happy for them to get in touch with me. And thank you to Kay, because she got us in on work experience, and I got my foot in the door and kind of didn't let them close it. And so I would go back in there regularly, and then when I was at uni, I was working there part-time, and it's how I basically just didn't let them get rid of me. It was really what happened.
Kay now does news on the same radio station as me, and she does it from the same little yellow studio in Hamilton that I use. I think she's
wonderful.
a legend.
Yeah, I've still got the reference she wrote me from that first work experience trip when I was 16, and she said, "I look forward to working with you one day." And when she was presenting the breakfast show with Paul Henry, I got a job there as a producer. And so I said, Kate, I'm working with you. Your reference said it would happen.
It's a wonderful legacy. What caught your imagination? Why did it grab you?
Journalism?
Yeah.
I think I was quite a quiet, shy student, and very much so. I was looking back at my old reports recently, and they said, Melissa just isn't talking. She's not engaging in class, and it was writing and then later drama that brought me out of my shell, probably in a too much out of my shell, some might argue, because I think it was just the ability to see stories through other people's eyes, through writing and through drama that, I don't know, it just captured my imagination, and the idea that you could communicate someone's feelings, someone's life, someone's story through the means of you writing that down. It was just something that was quite exciting to me. And then I think going into that TVNZ newsroom and seeing that you could then illustrate that with pictures that people weren't privy to, in their kind of day-to-day office job, and you could say, this is what's been happening. It just sparked something in me that felt, like it was exciting and brought me out of my shell.
Was there any inclination towards that possible love of storytelling before you noticed journalism? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, stories and words and reading were, I just couldn't get enough of that. And I see that in my son now, which I think is just so lovely, that love of reading. And so, yeah, I think that it was always there. And but then when I was probably around 10, my nana was careers advisor at a local school near me, and so she was already starting to talk to me about, now what are you thinking of doing in the future? And so I think I made up my mind, I wanted to work at the Hauka Pakiranga Times at that time.
Big dreams.
Yeah. I thought, I want my name in the newspaper.
Yeah. That's really, really good. So the stint at TVNZ then, opening up a whole new world, what was that like for you?
It was exciting seeing, these people that I admired so much, like reporters like Kay and Lee Taylor and Paul Hobbs and all of these reporters who I just admired so much, and then seeing the way that they would storytell. I think I just thought, wow, this is not a job. This is fun, and this is what I want to do. And I just couldn't imagine myself in any role that didn't have the excitement of coming to work and finding out so much about a topic, and then being able to go home and it was done, and there was no homework. You just go back to work the next day and it's something new, fresh. And, you get out of the office and you get to talk to people and meet people, and it still is, I think, to me, the perfect job.
Why the move to TV3? TVNZ is such an institution.
Yeah, I started there on the overnight desk, and so I was kind of the young girl that was always one of the overnight desk girls, and I think sometimes you have to move to be seen as something else. And I went to TV3 and kind of got thrust in the deep end, as a lot of people do and did at the organisation where, it was, the underdog, and so there was limited resource, and so that meant big opportunities. It also meant big risk. So you're thrown in the deep end and you sink or swim, and I was able to show that I had developed skill beyond being on the overnight desk. And I had been tapped on the shoulder to go over there. And I think it was the beginning of a long career in reporting, and was many happy years.
Yeah, and there's lots to explore. Thrown in the deep end though, what are some of the first memories there where, because of course that analogy comes with treading water, feeling like you're out of your depth. So what are some of the first experiences that stick in your head?
There were a couple of occasions I think where I was given a reporting shift for the 6 o'clock news, which felt like a big deal.
It's big when you've been on overnights.
Especially at that time where it was, you didn't have news all throughout the day on your phone or even online. It was like everyone sat down and tuned in for the 6 o'clock news. And so I would be, the bottom of the pile in terms of the stories that were discussed in the morning. But then it meant that you were the only person in the pile if, say, a story comes in at 5:30, half an hour before the news, or even later, 5:45. And so I remember some occasions where that was the case, and it was like, wow, the only person we've got sitting in the newsroom is Melissa, and we've just had this breaking news come in. And so, get her to sit in the newsroom and do a live cross on this, and she either makes it or doesn't. And I guess I was lucky. I made it and was able to swim.
How does it feel as someone who, and like myself, grew up in an era where the 6 p.m. news was the thing, whereas now it feels like it's more just an update or a summation of all the stuff we've been feeding on right throughout the day. As a news person, that's got to come with some thoughts and feelings around the changing of news as well, where that 6 p.m. news isn't the institution that it once was.
I find it hard to accept that it's not. So to me, I still have an internal body clock that at 6 o'clock I still have to sit down and turn on the news. So I accept that for a lot of people that might not be the case anymore, but for me it still feels like here is the summary of the day with all of the vision that I need to see. I accept that people are getting their news in other ways though. And for me, I think that's something we also just need to embrace. And I think in some ways it's wonderful that we can get content for any particular niche or community that we are interested in. And yes, it is more fragmented, but you get to consume media that interests you. I think the thing that concerns me, or that I think we really need to think about, is when you've got that fragmentation of media and you can see something you are interested in anywhere, how do we make sure that we still have content where you can see yourself in that content and it is made for everyone? Because the importance of having a healthy, thriving media landscape where you have big media organisations that cater for a wide range of people, that reflects diversity of thought, diversity of culture, diversity of opinion, is also really important as all of those niche community, smaller media platforms. So in answer to your question, I still love the 6 p.m. news, but I see that there's a space for the other ways that we're consuming media, and I embrace that too. Yeah,
I think there's a real place for want of a better phrase, pillars of news that we all experience together as well, whether it be people sitting down reading the same paper in the morning and then tuning in to the 6 p.m. news at night. So we've all got a shared experience to talk about. I see a real value in that. I see that in the television that we watch as well. Like I remember when I was young, you'd turn up at school and the other guys would have watched Dukes of Hazzard as well. So you're all talking about the show that you watched the night before. We've lost some of that common experience, and I think that common experience is valuable, especially with our news.
Totally. That shared connection. And you still feel it at live events. I went to, I think like the rest of Auckland, went to that Coldplay concert at Eden Park, was it earlier this year? And just being in that environment and feeling like you are having a shared experience and a connection with people who are experiencing something at the same time is really important. And we used to have that in our news and television, and we do still to some extent. But yeah, it's an important part of social cohesion and unity and understanding that I think we do really need to be really mindful of, and I've become especially mindful of it, since the COVID period where we kind of had that taken away. I'm a big fan of libraries. I love libraries as places of community and connection and reading. They're some of my favourite places.
Yeah, and the democratisation of information for people who can't afford to necessarily have computers and internet and phones in their home. The library is a place to access information where everybody can access it. This is going to feel like a slightly hard jump from that conversation because I could just keep talking about that for ages. It's a slightly hard jump, but I think there's a connection here because I think as we lose some of our media, we're now filtering international stories through the lens of people of other nations rather than necessarily through our lens as Kiwis with Kiwis on the ground. So your role as foreign correspondent for TV3, I think it was a really important one. So how did you move into foreign correspondent? Because that's a big deal to up sticks for a number of years and move overseas, be based in London. That's a big call. Yeah,
I guess I just saw the adventure in it when I moved. That was 2011. And I had been reporting in Auckland for TV3 for about 3 or 4 years. So it was, I don't know, it felt like, a good next step to move on and challenge myself. But it was quite a step just because of the first story I think that I landed in and went to report on, which was, the Arab Spring, which was all happening at that time. I learned a lot probably about reporting and about myself by landing there and heading straight into that story.
Yeah, again, it's been thrown in the deep end. So for those not familiar with the Arab Spring, kicked off in Tunisia with the population having issues around corruption and the economy flagging. So you've got people who are just struggling to live, starting to push back, spilled over into places like Egypt. Syria is probably the longest iteration of it. But how did you enter into the story then?
Well, I think I was still struggling to find a place to live in London, so I was in a backpackers in King's Cross because I was refusing to spend any more than that while I was looking for a place to live. And so in some ways I was kind of glad to get sent on an overseas assignment. But I had been watching what was happening, and it was looking pretty intense, to be honest. In Egypt, in Til Death Square, I think there had been hundreds reported killed at that time.
Yep.
And later we knew that there was even more. I think around 850 eventually were killed in demonstrations that had turned violent. They were mostly young people who were, as you say, demonstrating against corruption, and there had been a state of emergency in place for many years, which meant there had been crackdowns on corruption and also on media. And so it was looking like it had got to the point where we should be in reporting on this and getting our own perspective, as you say. So I flew in with the cameraman that was in London at the time, Leon Menzies, and we, I guess, didn't really know what to expect, except that we knew that it could be pretty volatile.
Can I just ask, because the journalistic instinct here fascinates me, because it has always struck me as more like those who fight fires, the police running towards the situation, whereas every instinct would say New Zealanders need to get out of there. Was there ever a battle for you, or was the instinct, yeah, we got to go, there's no question?
I think as a journalist, you want to be at the forefront of what's happening, because otherwise, are you really telling the story? You know, are you really giving information to people who can't be there or can read it elsewhere? Or, you know, you want to know that you are in the thick of what is actually happening. So it's actually hard to sit in London and watch something happening from afar and be reporting on it when you're like, I'm actually not there. I'm not amongst this. I can't report on all the things that you don't actually see on camera. You know, what's it like for these people? What are they talking about? I think it's just instinctive that you want to be in the thick of it. When we did arrive, though, the officials at the airport just took everything off us, all of our camera equipment and everything. We weren't really given a reason. I don't think they expected that they needed to give a reason. So we journeyed through to the hotel where we were going to be staying. At this point, the President, Hosni Mubarak, had announced he was stepping down. So the mood changed quite a lot. And it was actually very celebratory. There were still live rounds being fired in the air in celebration, so it was still a dangerous place to be. But people were in kind of a jubilant mood. At the hotel, it was all boarded up because it had been, you know, subject to looting and gunshots and all sorts of things earlier. But we were inside and just thinking, how do we report on this? We've got it's not really the age of smartphones either. So I sat in the foyer knowing that this was a hotel where a lot of other media were staying. And I just stopped a cameraman and I said, hey, could you please just film something for us and somehow help us get it back to New Zealand? And this camera operator from Germany just said, I've got a whole spare camera. Just come and take all my equipment.
Fantastic.
We couldn't believe it. And he just gave everything to us. I think he kind of sympathised to that if he were in the same situation, he would want help. So we went and just stood outside the hotel because we were worried about going off with this guy's equipment and interviewed people about how they were feeling. And we didn't stay too long. People wanted to start taking pictures with us. And at this point, I started feeling people groping me from behind, pulling at my clothes. It felt dangerous. And Leon totally had my back. I was so lucky, and all of the camera operators who've worked in London and across TV3 are amazing. But, you know, the camera operators I worked with, Leon and Bob, very special friends, definitely had my back. And Leon was like, we're going inside. We don't need to be in here anymore. I later found out about 100 metres, not even 100 metres up from where we were that very night, the CBS reporter Lara Logan had been subjected to a sustained assault, sexual assault, and was in hospital with injuries. And so I think the whole assignment we realised was pretty risky. Later on we realised kind of how risky it had been. And it was, a pretty eye-opening assignment as a first one for landing in London as the Europe correspondent.
Yes, it's big. Had you been provided with any training on how to handle a situation like that? And I ask because if you work in the aid and development sector and you're going to be heading off into a tricky situation, you're you're taken into simulation training and you're taught how to deal with it. I'm curious, did you get anything?
I did afterwards.
Afterwards.
I think it was no fault of the network, really. I was full of confidence, maybe misplaced confidence, and I didn't want people to think that I couldn't do it. So I certainly didn't raise any issues of I'm not sure that I've been trained for this. But I did have extensive conflict zone training after that, which is fascinating in itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was prepared after that for sure.
Yeah, good. I mean, it's not like you would have landed in London thinking the next thing you were going to be facing was the Arab Spring and being in Egypt in that very situation.
Yeah. No, we couldn't. No one could have foreseen that, and it wasn't a story. As I say, it wasn't an assignment I was going to turn down.
Of course not. So just very briefly too, because this is not actually the main story that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
But very briefly, 2015 Paris attacks, because you had to report on that as well.
Yeah. So this is the Buttercon Theatre, and there had been, a series of attacks at the theatre and at outside venues where people had been sitting. And so we flew over and were doing live crosses into it was actually the morning show, I think, with Paul Henry at the time. I was actually by myself, but with a international crew who had set up a spot basically where they could just kind of have international journalists come and do their spot and then move on. And I was talking to Paul Henry, talking about the feeling on the street and that everybody was on edge. And I could feel this crowd just moving at pace behind me. And I thought, I kind of thought this is a little strange. I could feel something was going on. And then looking at the camera operator's eyes behind the camera, I thought, okay, something really is happening. And then somebody came up and was just gesturing towards me, we've got to cut this, shaking their hand, saying, we've got to cut this. There's a shooter. The shooter's here. And so I think I said on air, Paul, we have to stop. We've been told there's something happening in the area and we'll come back to you. We packed up and I noticed everybody else had already left. We ran to the TV van, and then sitting in there, because I had done the conflict zone training, I thought, well, this thing's a bit silly because the media may well be a target here.
Sitting in a branded van?
Sitting in a branded van, and, a branded van is not going to stop whatever comes through the window. So I thought, I'm going to get out and make a run for it. And so I ran to a nearby hotel, and then they were sheltering people in a wine cellar downstairs. And there were people, crying and hugging and speaking French, which unfortunately my tourist French didn't extend to, so I didn't really know what was going on. My phone was about to run out, and I had a choice to either tell my mum what was going on, because I knew she would have been watching and would be terrified, or tell work what was going on and tell them that I could do another cross later on. So I text them both.
Oh, well done.
I said, Mum, if you're watching, don't worry, it's fine. And then I said
I did run for my life, but we're fine.
Yeah, I'm fine now, I'm fine. And she said, I wasn't watching what happened. I said, doesn't matter. Got in touch with work, and it turned out to be fireworks. But it was just an example of how on edge people were. And, in that situation, the terror that had not only been inflicted on those who were killed and who were injured, but just people in the city who felt like they couldn't go about their everyday lives as normal. It extended right across the city, really.
Yeah. How do you come back to New Zealand after that? Those are big experiences, the moving around, dealing with the world on edge like that, people on edge like that. To come back to New Zealand, it's much slower. We're not worried about anybody attacking us. We have stuff, and some big stuff is played out here, but it's a whole other level. So what was it like coming back?
I think there's beauty in that after I was there for 5 years, and so there is some beauty in the stories that sometimes make lead news in New Zealand.
Yes.
A lot of people say, slow news day, or not much going on, and I think, well, this is nice sometimes. As a journalist, it's not that fun, but as a New Zealander, you think, well, maybe we should celebrate this a bit. But I was coming back to a role with another dear friend, Tom McRae, so I was, excited about that challenge and opportunity. It was a way to take my mind off the fact that I was coming back from what was essentially the dream job. Yeah, I think just the new challenge of that role kind of kept me going. Mm-hmm. I did leave behind my partner at the time, now my husband, in London, so that made that hard for sure. And we did long distance for about 2.5 years until I finally dragged him over here. So and now he's happy here and
Good.
Won't let me take him back over there. So
safer here.
Yeah.
The story that we are going to talk about, it feels useless saying that now, but the story that we are going to talk about, I really like that this one has been raised. It involves a death knock. And the reason I like that it's been raised is because so often through the 5 seasons of this show, we've used the death knock as an example of a trauma that especially young journalists have to face that is unnatural. Has to happen, but it's unnatural. So I'm very interested in this story. So tell us about it.
Yeah, and it is traumatic having to do death knocks. And so I think that's potentially why this has left such an impact on me, because it's a story that I'm actually proud of and feel I really learnt something. It was around 8 years ago, there had been some discussion on social media that there was a wedding and that the bride had passed away on her wedding day from meningitis. And the very next morning, I was asked to go out and find the groom. And, I mean, I didn't want to.
Well, understandably, this is a groom who's lost his bride the day after his wedding, and to have someone turn up unknown to him to ask for the story.
It's awful. The only way you can rationalise it is that I have also been in situations where I have been at an event or, somewhere where someone has just passed away and the family get a huge amount of comfort from talking to people. One example I can think of where the family was hugely accommodating was the death of Sunny Fai, the warrior. Their family was just beautiful in sharing about him. And so those are the kinds of things you think maybe they want to say something. But still, in your heart of hearts, you think this is not fun. So I went out and found this address where there were people clearly that had been related to what was happening. And I just tapped the shoulder of somebody who I thought was perhaps not direct family. And I said, look, I'm here. I just want to tell you my details. And if or when you're ever in a point where you know that the family is wanting to talk about this, maybe it's something where we can raise awareness, but I know that it's not quite the time now. Here is a way to contact me. Then walked around the corner, and then the next minute, the groom walks out and stands with me at the fence. And I could see he was just still processing and still in shock, really, at what had happened. And so I said the same thing. You know, I've left my contact details with somebody here. If you ever feel like you need to get in contact with me, please do, but I'm leaving you. I'm not standing around here. I don't want to be here. I don't expect that you're going to tell your story. Went back to the newsroom and, of course, you know, the newsroom is kind of disappointed you don't have a story, but
I have no doubt that your honesty in that moment probably meant a lot.
Yeah, I hope so. And look, I don't think I'm sitting here as like a shining example of how to do death knocks, because I think I've got it wrong in the past too. And
there is no amazing way to do it.
No, and no one wants to do them. And, you know, I think all journalists have best intentions. No one wants to inflict more trauma on somebody in that moment. But what I think they're a real reminder of is human-led storytelling and the importance of actually being a human first before a journalist. And also the importance, we're in a situation now where there is so much pressure in newsrooms in terms of time. You know, if you're in the newsroom that day, you have to do something to try and get a story. Because there just aren't so many reporters around. But also a story that people want to consume or are interested in. And I just think it's something to really bear in mind in terms of supportive newsrooms, is that supportive newsrooms means allowing journalists to have time to build relationships, to build trust, and to build knowledge. And, you know, the pressure and the squeeze on resource squeezes our ability to do that. And
can I just add there, it squeezes your ability to be human first. And if you're not allowed to be human first, you're going to burn at some point. You can only sustain that for so long. You have to be allowed to be human first.
Because 6 years on from now, no one's going to remember whether you delivered that day, whether your story was lead story or whether it was buried in the paper, or lead story or buried in the third break. But you are going to remember whether you treated someone well or you treated someone badly. And, you know, I kind of feel that I'd rather sleep at night. So, yeah, the groom and he's a police officer too, so he would have had to deal with people in this situation as well. So I had even more empathy for him being himself in that situation. And he messaged me in the days following and said, you know, I'm not ready to talk, but I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated the way you spoke with me that day, and that there were others that didn't. And that remains probably the most important message I've ever received. Just to know that, yeah, I didn't kind of inflict any more hurt that day. And then 5 years later, I am contacted by him, and he says, I'm ready to tell the story.
5 years.
Yeah. And he wanted to talk about, and because I'm talking about his story, I would love and urge people to support the Meningitis Foundation and the work that they do around awareness, because that's, you know, I owe it to him and to the family of that woman to help them in spreading that message. Yeah, he wanted to tell his story because he felt that was something that he could contribute to the Meningitis Foundation as well.
How did you then approach that as a story? Because 5 years on doesn't have the immediate drama that it had 5 years ago. It's not stale. That's not the word that I want, but that's what's kind of sitting there in my mind.
Yeah, and it, you know, that depth of emotion is one of the most powerful storytelling tools, right? So you want people to feel that emotion so that they can connect with a story. So I know what you're saying is, how do you spark that? And
Yes.
what we did, and I asked him if he was comfortable in doing, is we went back to the wedding venue, and it was the first time he had done that. And I think he felt ready because it was the next step in healing. But it was incredibly hard for him to do that. And yeah, again, I'm grateful for him for understanding that was a powerful way to explain what he had been through and how that would help, in raising awareness.
How did you come to the idea of going back to the wedding venue?
I guess I think in terms of television.
Yeah.
And I thought, how do I show this? How do we kind of illustrate and remind people of, those images of your wedding day in a beautiful venue, and everything is set to be the most perfect, most memorable day of your life for good reasons. And then to contrast that with the experience that he had, I thought, in terms of visual storytelling, you only have to see those images and you feel the story of what happened that day, let alone hear his account of it. And seeing him take a moment in the spot where he said his vows is all you needed to know about this story, So yeah, I think I was probably led by, how do we visually tell this?
I love the fact that you've combined good storytelling with quite a poignant therapy as well. You've given him the chance to experience something, to process in a physical place, which is really important for human beings, not just sitting in a room and talking things out, but sometimes our body needs to do things and we need to be in physical places. So we just did an episode with Tommy Livingston a couple of weeks ago, and with Tommy, we talked about the balance between people first versus the story. And how he got out because he was just leaning all about the care for the people and just lost the story. Whereas we think journalism can get into a problematic place when it's only story. So to find that balance is really important.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like you found that balance really well with someone who, even 5 years later, would still be processing grief.
Yeah. And I do want to, you very generously said I gave him that opportunity, but I want to give him all the credit for actually taking this step. He didn't have to contact me. He didn't have to agree to go there. He had some understanding of how it needed to be told as a story too, and he was accepting of that. And so, yeah, I've, full credit to him actually for enabling the story that he wanted to be told.
How do you not get lost in the grief? Because there's that story, but you would have encountered grief plenty of times. I knew you were going to ask that question, and when I have an answer for you, I'll come back to in your new studio. There are a lot of professions that deal with grief, and a lot of people that I know who work in those professions as well that say, you've got to separate yourself from the story. And I actually don't try to, because I feel as soon as you lose that emotion, as soon as you lose the human in you when you're writing the story, it's just words on a paper, or you're just reading. It's just your voice reading words. It's what's the purpose of it? So I probably hold things too deeply, and I think that I like to think that helps in the way that I write, but I probably
should let go sometimes.
Well, maybe.
Afterwards.
Mel, you don't strike me as a person, in what I've seen of you on the AM show and watching what you're doing now and hearing you in various places, you don't strike me as someone who has been damaged by it, like held onto it to the point where it's causing you to engage life in ways that really isn't healthy. Because I can think about people who might process all that emotion they're taking on through either completely disengaging or turning to alcohol, or you can see a litany of broken relationships, or that having health issues and they haven't connected the dots. And it might just be you're putting on a really good public veneer, but I don't see that.
I think I have people around me who understand me very well and know when I just need the time to be quiet, and know that eventually I'm going to want to talk about it, but it might not be straight away. And yeah, I think I'm just lucky to have a few special people who really understand me in that way. So that helps for sure.
This might be a weird question. How have you picked who you trust in that regard?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, in some ways I trust everyone and not many people at all. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I'm very trusting of everybody I meet until you break it, you know? But I think the people I really trust are the people who, I don't know, I think you just kind of innately just get somebody, you know? And I've realised who those people are over the years. And I have a lot of friends, but also just a few that are really close, that are lifelong friends, you know? My very best friends, girlfriends, I've been friends with since I was like 6 years old. So, you know, there's not much that they don't know about me that I don't know about them too. And there's a lot that they could tell that would break my trust. So I trust them.
And you've probably got stuff on them too. So
yeah, exactly.
It goes both ways. I mean, that's a testament to character, though. I think anybody who can hold friendships from childhood, you've got to be doing something right in life.
Yeah, maybe it's just like TVNZ. I just don't let people let me go.
So that's personal grief at an individual level. Then, of course, in your work, you've dealt with national grief as well, with like the funeral of Nelson Mandela when he passed away, and your time as foreign correspondent. And then you're dealing with the nation's grief.
Yeah, and mixed with the spectacle of it, you know, which is also crazy because you have some people there who are there because they want to be part of some historic occasion, but also those who are feeling it like they are family. And so it's, I guess, really important too that you strike the right tone with the people that you're dealing with, that some of these people are really grieving. Some of them are here in the adrenaline and the excitement of it. I always think in those situations too that just because it is a grieving process that is shared with a nation or a huge group of people, I try and remember that there's still a family at the core of this. And yeah, those stories are the hardest to write when you're writing about somebody's life. Like how do I write a story about Nelson Mandela has passed away? How do we write a story about his life? How do you write a story about Queen Elizabeth's life? You know, I always have found those stories the hardest to write because of the significance of them. And stories about people who, you know, I've covered on a more individual basis as well. And their families are going through the most traumatic time in their lives, and you're writing about the person that they love. I find that incredibly hard sometimes.
Yeah.
But also just because I, feel that it's such an important story to write.
that sort of stuff, if I was doing it, would keep me awake at night.
Yeah.
I wouldn't sleep well. I've been mulling it over all the time.
Yeah.
So sleep, what does that look like for you when you're in those spaces?
I mean, the days are often so long that you only have kind of, 4 or 5 hours of sleep on the road anyway. So generally I am so exhausted by that point that I sleep all of that. I think I'm a very lucky person. I can sleep on a plane, sleep on a seat, sleep anywhere, which I think is a prerequisite of being a Europe correspondent at some point. But so I've never struggled with sleep. Don't you worry about that.
Good. It's a superpower.
Yeah. I mean, the worst time for sleep was actually having babies.
Yes.
That's because then it wasn't down to me and whether I wanted to sleep. It was somebody else. And that was actually, that did cause me a little bit of challenge, especially on the AM show. There was times where I even towards the end, I had 2 kids under 3 and I was getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't have a lot of sleep by that point.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, parenting is a sleep deprivation game for a number of years on its own.
Yeah.
Throw a show like the AM show into the mix.
Yeah.
It's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Sometimes they were putting me to bed at night. They were reading me books to get me to sleep. But yeah, I've learned to operate on very little sleep.
Them reading you books bridges us to the next bit that I want to make sure that we get a little bit of information about. The transition from AM show, you're still doing a little bit of media, but school shorts. Tell us about school shorts and the bridge across into that. Yeah,
so in thinking after AM finished, what do I want to do? And there was one point where I thought, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue in media, not because I was disillusioned, but because I thought I'm in the best job I can imagine right now, despite the 3 a.m. alarm. I love what I'm doing, so how can I step into another role that I'm not going to love as much? I was finding that was something that I really had to tackle. So I thought, okay, and in the end, I've decided I'm far from done in media, but I needed something that I was hugely passionate about to kind of give me that joy of another challenge. And that has always been education for me. And there had been a lot of talk in the interviews we were doing about literacy achievement levels in New Zealand especially. And because I have a 5-year-old, so he's just started school, and a 2-year-old who's, just starting talking, I thought I'd really like to see what that looks like in the classroom. And I went and did some of the courses that teachers are doing and thought there is a lot of content here that would be really helpful for parents to know. And maybe I can use some of my media experience in distilling information and communicating it to people to develop something like School Shorts, which is a podcast about all the aspects that feed into learning, but especially around reading and writing.
And literacy is so important. It's a place where our country needs to keep giving more focus to. We're going through some big shifts in our education around literacy, so it's a very important resource. If parents or anybody listening does want to access School Shorts, how can they find it?
Well, you can listen wherever you get your podcasts, so on all the usual podcast platforms, on YouTube, and on social media. School Shorts NZ is what to search.
Great. The last question I ask everybody is the future of journalism in Aotearoa New Zealand. What do you think it looks like?
I think I just go back to what we said earlier about fragmentation. I think that we are going to continue to see fragmented audience because you can get content tailored to whatever particular interest you have. And so I just hope that there is the support of our larger media organisations to continue to cater to a wide range of people and continue to show that diversity of thought, diversity of culture and opinion. It is so important that we have that when outside of that we have fragmentation. I hope that we can see the merit in supporting those organisations to continue to do that.
That's good. Mel, I want to close by saying thank you. I want to thank you for coming onto this podcast, but I want to thank you for being a mainstay of New Zealand journalism for a number of years now.
Oh, thank you.
For telling some very important global stories and being a New Zealand lens within those stories. I want to thank you for the courage to take some risks that put you in situations that were well outside of just what most average New Zealanders grow up with. I want to thank you for your care in handling other people's grief. I want to thank you for your human and honest approach in that death knock in particular, and the door that opened for someone to be able to tell their story. I want to thank you for caring about journalism, for caring about people, and for caring about stories, and for continuing to do that. I want to thank you for taking the time to find a passion as well, and to show that reaching out and aiming to do the things that we're passionate about is entirely worthwhile. And as someone who, via my wife, is connected to the care of young people and their learning, thank you for aiming at literacy in particular. You are appreciated.
Oh, thank you so much. Now I know why there's those tissues under the desk, just in case.
Yeah, I've had a couple of occasions where
That's
people
so
have been solid and then they get to the thanks at the end.
Yeah. Yeah, you got me in the feels with that one. Thank you. I appreciate it, and pleasure to talk to you about it today.
Ngā mihi nui, Mel. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me. Thanks to Radio New Zealand for hosting this series, and thanks to you for giving some of your precious time to listen. A big shout out to Mallory Carey, Sam Donkin, Mick Andrews and Josh Couch for producing this episode of Recovering. If you appreciate this podcast, please give us a 5-star rating and share it with someone else who would like it. And remember to follow in your favourite app to catch future episodes. At Media Chaplaincy New Zealand, we value our media. We demonstrate this by offering free, independent and confidential support for media professionals. With a solid and caring team in various parts of the country, we're here to help. So if you work in the media industry and want to chat to someone who's there to listen, head to mediachaplaincy.nz to arrange a catch-up, and the coffee's on us.